a rock-rolling science fiction adventure comic. High energy infused with fun, unabashedly progressive, a hyper-modern rock and roll adventure in an electric future. An intriguing comic for all sorts of reasons. Bleeding with style, grabbing your shirt collar, and dragging you into a kick-ass world with the promise of one hell of a ride. A book that Tank Girl herself would approve. That's high praise. You'd think this would be for the US release of the Valerian comic. But it's not. These were the reviews for Kim and Kim, a comic written and created by Magdalene Visaggio and drawn by Eva Cabrera. I love to say that the comic merits all these great reviews, but it doesn't. The book isn't horrible or unreadable, it's just mediocre. So why did it get all this attention, including an EISNER nomination? Because Magdalene is transgender. That's it. Because it's definitely not from the quality, and I'm using that word very loosely, of her book. This book's claim to fame is that it features a transgender woman named Kim and a bisexual woman also named Kim as the co-lead characters. The book is, quote, queer. In normal speak, that means it features lots of LGBTQ LMNOP plus *, hashtag up, down, left, right, whole day, and press start characters. They're presented as, quote, normal in that everyone you encounter is queer. If that seems a little odd, it is. Barely 5% of the population identifies as gay or bisexual, and less than 1% of the population identifies as transgender. It's not that you would never encounter GLBT people, and I'm using it the right way because I don't think that lesbian feminists should get top billing. That's actually why the L is put first now, to give credit to feminists who didn't do anything to help gay men. It's not that there are not many gay, bisexual, and transgender people in the world. There are millions of them, but not to the point where every other person you meet is gay or questioning or curious or whatever they're saying now. I'm not against telling these types of stories, by the way. Fantasy is fantasy, so if in your fantasy world GLBT people make up half the population, fine. I'm just against doing it badly, and that's what happens in Kim and Kim. So let's break down this 4-issue miniseries. The premise is that Kim and Kim are bounty hunters struggling to pay their rent. Totally original. And they screw up a bounty deal and have no money. Totally original. They end up encountering a pair of bounty hunters. Still totally original. One of whom is the ex of the transgender Kim. Do I even need to say it again? Fine. Totally original. The rivals try to get the Kims to join them on a bounty, but trans Kim wants no part of it because it means working for her dad, who she hates. I'm not even going to say it anymore. Okay, just one more time. Totally original. So the Kims decide to steal the bounty out of spite. They end up finding out that the bounty is a polymorph named Tom who looks like an octopus, who's killed his way to freedom to get away from a drug dealer. The Kims task themselves with taking him back to his home dimension. They then have to deal with the drug dealer's minion, who was supposed to snatch up the missing polymorph. In between this, they take on another bounty to pay their rent, but he gets killed by the drug dealer minion, so the Kims still can't pay their rent. But bisexual Kim's dad comes to the rescue and pays it for them. The end. I'm not kidding, that's literally how the book ends. Let me get to the positives because this won't take long. Eva Cabrera's art is good. It's not great and it's not bad. It works for the tone of the story, which is mostly tongue-in-cheek. I'm not a fan of the Scott Pilgrim art style, but it's not horrible. Just not my thing. When Eva takes her time and really works on a panel or page, it looks fantastic. When she gets lazy or tries to cheat, you can tell. She's good at expressions and adds in some quirky details. Her action scenes aren't that great, but they get the job done. Another positive is that the concept, although a complete retread of awesome animes from the 90s, isn't that bad. Who doesn't like a dimension hopping story? The problem is that you don't really get that. It's never really explained how or why dimension hopping happens or works or what it means for the broader world. It's not clear whether it's limited to hopping planets, galaxies, or the entire universes. The dimensions are numbered, but we never really get any explanation of how or why. We don't even get to see the characters hop dimensions. The entire story takes place in one dimension on different planets. If it is shifting from dimension to dimension, Max doesn't make that clear. It's this weird situation where someone wants to world build, but doesn't actually do it. We're told about a bigger world without ever getting to see it. What a jip. Think about the first episode of Cowboy Bebop. Within the first 10 minutes of the show, we know the date, how the bounty hunting works, the tech they use, and some of the limits. That's just enough info for us to understand the world the characters live in. We don't get that in Kim and Kim. Nothing is explained. I'm not talking about having Star Trek technobabble. I'm talking about simple Star Wars level droids and power converters. We get none of that. I mean, Trans Kim fights with a guitar that she uses like a hammer. Totally original. How? Why? Bisexual Kim's family are necromancers, so apparently there's magic on top of tech. No explanation of that. And then there's the transgender character herself and the complete absence of any explanation of how transitioning works in that world. Is it surgery? Is it magic? Is it gene manipulation? That's something the audience would like to know, but it's not there. What a waste. There was an opportunity to really play on the transgender angle and explain why in their world someone transitioning isn't a big social issue, even if it's a big personal issue. And I know why. It's because Max thinks she's an edgelord. I give Magdalene credit for telling a fast-paced story, at least when there's not a lot of dialogue. When it's just pictures, it flows very well. When it comes to dialogue, it's the typical cringy millennial nonsense, lots of swearing peppered with dated pop culture references, and talking about doing drugs. You know when someone tries to be funny? That's what most of the jokes are in this book. Some of them work, most of them don't. It's like Mag set out to prove it's such a fine line between stupid and clever, by crossing the line every chance she got. Sometimes you just need to let the funny happen on its own. What I mean is that let the situation be funny if that's what would actually happen there. Every character in every situation doesn't need to be a joke. If Max had watched some of Mel Brooks' better films, she could have seen how to give the scenes humor without feeling like she was trying to be funny. Because when you're trying to be funny, you're not funny. And no, sarcasm and snark isn't humor. And if you're not funny, let it alone. I'm not funny. I have moments, but I'm really not good at it. So I don't do it because if I did, it looks sad. Like a shaved fat man on a nudist beach. Chris Christie, making sand castles with his back fat and body sweat. Oh, now it's going to be in your head for the rest of the day. Nothing's getting that out. You're welcome. The other problem is that Magdalene is really hung up on presenting a quote queer story. Most of the cast fits into this GLBTQ plus category. There's nothing wrong with that per se, it just feels artificial. Like she's doing it to make a point instead of just having it a natural part of her story. The easiest way to fix it is to address it in the story, set up why this is so common. Is it because the new dimensions shatter people's understanding of sexuality and sex? Is it because new technology made those differences irrelevant? Is it because Kim and Kim, by virtue of being part of that community, tend to associate with members of that community? If you're going to do something like this, explain it. You don't have to do much. Look at Star Trek. A couple of quick throwaway lines throughout the original series explain why the bridge crew was so ethnically diverse. That's all the story needs. Where it really starts to create problems is when we get backstory on the characters. That's because little of it happens naturally. Most of the reveal of the characters' quote queerness happens in these awkward conversations during downtime. We find out that Trans Kim dated one of the rival bounty hunters named Sard, or was at least sexually interested in him. She ponders whether she could remain, quote, normal if she ended up in a gay relationship with him. Instead, she transitioned into being a woman and hooked up with bisexual Kim. It's info we need since the book was sold on the transgender thing, but it's in such an odd place in the story. Worse, it has nothing to do with the story. If you didn't know the characters were bi and trans, nothing changes. It doesn't add anything other than ticking off a representation box. The closest plot point it serves is this dynamic between Trans Kim and her dad, but that's not even made clear. The only thing that we get is that her dad keeps referring to Kim, whose name is Joaquin, as him. So there's tension there, but other than that little bit, nothing comes of it. Again, wasted opportunity. But what really bugged me is that this story is just thrown together. It moves from one beat to another without any real connection. Let me give you an example. This is a 4-issue miniseries. The Kims are trying to return Tom, the polymorph, back to his dimension. They find out that bisexual Kim's aunt Dejuna and her partner hit the dimension to help keep the polymorph safe from the drug dealer. Apparently rescuing the ones he already had wasn't part of their plan. Well, it turns out that the dimension is impossible to find without the proper info, and pretty hard to find with it. While they're discussing this, Tom whips out a gun and demands to be taken home. So far, so good. The plot keeps getting interrupted by bisexual Kim's inner monologue that describes stories that are way better and more interesting than the one we're reading right now, but fine. What happens though is that instead of showing us how Tom gets back to his dimension, we get a jump cut, in caption, to a restaurant where the Kims explain what happened to some friends, and then offer the friends drugs because Max is such an edgelord. If ever there were an example of shitty storytelling, that's it. You stopped the story before you got to the climax. The whole point of the story so far has been getting this guy to his home. You don't think your audience wants to see that after reading almost 90 pages? Eisner nominated. Didn't actually show the fucking climax of the story. Eisner nominated. What we get instead is a whole new story arc about the Kims not being able to pay their rent. This is at the end of issue 3 where they did the jump cut. That leads to Bai Kim calling her mom for money, who basically lectures her. Then they get attacked by a robot gorilla and then go to get a cheap bounty to get some money to pay for everything. That bounty accidentally leads them to the drug dealer's minion that I mentioned before, named Frankenape. He's a scientist who reconstructed his body from space and time's deadliest apes. I guess that's funny. He does his Bane thing, gets cut down by one of the rival bounty hunters named Columbus, who says, "I'm a ninja now, I guess." And then the Kims still get screwed out of the bounty because their original bounty was wanted alive, not dead, and Frankenape's mutated body was too big to carry, so they have no proof that they killed him. At the last moment, Bai Kim's mom texts her and says her dad paid the Kim's rent, and the book ends. Eisner nominated. You jump cut the end of your actual story, start a new one, and end that one with a fucking text message. Eisner nominated. What did I just read? What was this? It's not even a story. It's a cop-out, and then we get this whatever. What was this? How is this nominated for an Eisner? What makes this worthy of an award? She wussed out on the story. Why are you rewarding her for copping out on her own plot? It's not even like Mags had to draw it. She had an artist. She just had to write the damn thing. Didn't do it. Eisner nominated. Do you need any more proof that winning an Eisner means fuck all? It's right there. Before I was kind of pissed off that DC Comics rewarded Magdalene with the writer's training spot with Scott Snyder, but it looks like she actually needs it. And IDW just put her in charge of their Visionaries reboot. For those not old enough to remember, this was a toy line where the characters had holograms on their chest. It didn't last long because the toys didn't sell. So they put Mags on as the writer of the book. This isn't because she's a great or even capable writer, this is pure identity politics. And just in case you're thinking the miniseries did well, nope. Issue 1, 8,900. Issue 2, 4,900. Issue 3, 3,800. Issue 4, 3,100. Despite all the praise, basically no one read this book. Mags lost 45% of her orders from issue 1 to issue 2, and 65% of her orders from the first to the last issue. Who knows how many people actually bought the book? Yet this is the person DC gives the writer's training to. This is the person hired to write a defunct line that Jim Scallycrup, Jerry Conway, and Mark Bagley couldn't sustain. What in the actual fuck? I mean, is now the time for my black ass to get out there because I can actually write better stuff than this. Oh my God, just don't punish yourself reading this book. I did it so you don't have to. Eisner nominated. Eisner nominated. This is almost as bad as when Caitlyn Jenner won the Woman of the Year award when she had only been a woman for like 30 minutes. Caitlyn Jenner is not sexy, and this book is not Eisner-worthy. Unbelievable. You do a shitty job, and you get rewarded from not one, but 2 comic book companies. Well, let me know what you think in the comments below. Please hit the subscribe button and notification bell so that you can get all my uploads. Thanks for listening. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.